There are men who wear kindness like a second skin, smooth, untouched. And then there are the ones who sew it on crooked, hoping no one sees the seams. That was Luke Mallory. To everyone in Harrington, Luke was stitched from goodness. If your barn door stuck, he'd fix it before you asked. If your dog ran off, Luke was the first to comb the woods, smiling, patient, grinning even when the mud crept up to his knees. The mayor once called him a walking heartbeat. People clapped like it was scripture. I never clapped. The first time I met Luke, I was 10 and biking home from the lake. He stood under a broken streetlight holding a limp cat. The way he looked at it wasn't right. Not sad, not tender, curious, like he was waiting for it to twitch. He spotted me and smiled, said, "Poor thing got hit, but the cat wasn't bloody, not crushed. It was wrong, all wrong." He tucked it into a blanket and walked off like nothing happened. That was the first time I felt it, that chill, that gnawing sense that something inside him wasn't human. I told my mom. She told me to stop watching horror movies. Years passed. Luke got shinier. Won Volunteer of the Year 3 times. Had keys to the town church, the school, even the animal shelter. Nobody ever asked why he never had a job. He lived in the old Dunlow house by the marsh. Said he inherited it. Said he liked the quiet. But the quiet around Luke always felt thick, heavy, and people around him, they kept vanishing. Quietly, slowly, a drifter here, a hiker there, a gas station girl who worked the night shift. Folks just stopped showing up. Luke always joined the search parties, always found the gloves, the phones, the snapped chains, always clucked his tongue and muttered about coyotes. I kept count. There were 9. 9 people in 4 years. The sheriff said I watched too much TV. Then it was Benny, my little cousin, 9 years old. Loved comic books and gummy worms. Went to Luke's with a flat tire, never came back. Cops searched the woods for weeks. Luke cried harder than my aunt. Brought casseroles, lit candles, hugged too long. I snapped. I told the sheriff, the mayor, the pastor, all of them. I said Luke was lying. I said something was under that house, behind that goddamn smile. They said I was grieving. They said I was dangerous. So I stopped talking. Until the pipe burst. It happened after a thunderstorm. Heavy rain, heavy winds, lightning cracked a tree straight through the Dunlow house's porch. Luke was fine, barely scratched. But the foundation cracked. Water rushed into the basement. And it didn't come out clear. It came out dark. And it smelled like death. Neighbors called it sewage. Luke said it was old septic damage. But one man, an old plumber named Wally Jessup, offered to help. Said he'd seen that kind of damage before. Went down into the basement alone. He didn't come up. An hour passed. Then 2. By the 3rd hour, the sheriff showed up. The fire department followed. They broke open the locked basement door. What they found ended the town's silence. The concrete wall had collapsed, halfway in. Behind it was a hidden room. And in that room, skulls. Dozens. Some had necklaces, braces, pieces of shirts with names still legible. One had Benny's Batman pin, still bright against the dust. There were faces, too. Preserved ones, inside mason jars, labeled, arranged on shelves like some grotesque trophy case. A few faces were still recent, too recent. Luke didn't run. He didn't scream. He watched them dig it out like he was watching someone bake a pie. When they cuffed him, he said nothing, just smiled. And suddenly, nobody called me dramatic. They found diaries, drawings, dates, maps of where he'd buried others in the woods, photographs taken without consent, of people showering, sleeping, screaming. One photo showed my cousin tied up in a corner of that basement. The town stopped breathing. Luke's trial never happened. He died in his cell before it began, slit his own throat with a piece of glass left under his mattress. They said he left no note, but they were wrong. He wrote it on the wall in blood. She saw me. They think he meant me. They're right, I did see him, from the beginning. While the whole town wore blinders stitched with charity, I saw what was underneath. Now they look at me differently, like I'm cursed, or lucky, or both. The Dunlow house still stands, empty, chained up. But sometimes, after it rains, the basement bleeds again, and I still keep count. After the house was sealed and Luke was buried in a state-issued grave without a marker, Harrington tried to move on, tried to scrub the blood from its memory like a stain in the carpet. But rot doesn't care about bleach, and the smell clung to the town like wet wool. The media came, left. Then came back again when another body was found in the woods using Luke's map, a girl missing for 5 years, her jaw still clenched around the rosary she wore every day to school. I watched the sheriff cry as they zipped her into the bag. The funerals stacked up like dominoes. Old bones got new caskets. The graveyard bloomed with names once thought lost to time or bad luck. The town held candlelight vigils, sang hymns, and renamed the community center after the victims. But no one wanted to talk about the fact that the town's hero had been a butcher in disguise, that they let him in their homes, their churches, their lives. No one but me. I couldn't forget, not when I walked past the diner where Luke used to sit on the patio sipping lemonade, waving to children. Not when I saw the hardware store where he bought tools, zip ties, bleach, rope, all paid in cash, friendly smile on his face. I started collecting the names, the ones we knew, the ones we suspected. I made a list, and beside every name I added a question. Could there be more? I wasn't the only one asking. There was a new man in town, showed up a month after Luke's death, said his name was Roy Mercer, tall, clean-shaven, drove a county vehicle and wore a badge that didn't belong to any department nearby. He said he worked in forensic recovery, said he wanted to help the town process its grief. But he was no grief counselor. Roy spent every day near the Dunlow house, took soil samples, hauled out rusted barrels, brought in tech none of us recognized. One night I followed him after dark. He didn't notice. I watched him slide a long steel rod into the ground, around the property in a precise pattern, like he was probing for something. A week later, he knocked on my door. "You saw something in him," Roy said without introduction. "You saw what no one else did. I want to know what it was." I didn't let him in, but I talked. I told him about the cat, the missing people, the way Luke's face never seemed to match his words, how his smiles never reached his eyes, how the town wanted so badly to believe in goodness that they refused to look at the cracks. Roy listened, took notes. Then he told me something I wasn't prepared to hear. "There are more basements like that," he said. I asked him what he meant. He didn't answer. That night, I didn't sleep. 3 days later, the Dunlow house burned. No witnesses, no accelerant residue, just flames, blue-white and sudden, like something underground finally caught fire. The fire didn't spread. It stopped exactly at the walls. No grass burned, no trees scorched, just the house, reduced to blackened bone. I went there the next morning. So did Roy. He wasn't smiling. "They were sealed in," he muttered. Whatever was under the concrete, it wasn't just storage, it was containment. I didn't understand then, not fully. But I started to. Because 2 days after the fire, we found something. Another face. On my porch. Not a head, not a body, just a face. Skinned, pressed flat, the eyes cut out with surgical care. There was a note tucked behind it. Handwritten, tight letters. Some of them got out. The sheriff sealed the letter in evidence, took the face. But the next night, another face appeared on another porch. Then another. 4 in a week. None matched any known victims. The town fell into panic, Curfews, canceled events, church services held in daylight with locked doors, gun sales skyrocketed. But the thing no one said out loud haunted every street corner. Luke wasn't working alone. I started digging. Not into the basement, into Luke's life. Where he came from. His school records were fake. His license number didn't exist. The deeds to the Dunlow house? Forged. The Dunlows had never had children, never sold the house. They'd died in it, in the basement, sealed in with brick and mortar. No one ever asked why. No one ever checked. Roy showed up again, this time pale, sleep-deprived. We think Luke was one of them. I asked what he meant by them. He hesitated, then pulled out a file. Black and white photos, dozens, all the same man. Same face. Luke's face. In Kansas, 1963, then Idaho, 1979, Vermont, 1991, Texas, 2004. Always the same grin, always the same trail of missing people. But never aged, never caught. Until now. Whatever he was, Roy said, he wasn't human the way we understand it. And now, he's dead. But the thing that made him isn't. The Dunlow house didn't just burn. It screamed. Neighbors heard it, a shriek that shook window panes and made dogs foam at the mouth. They buried the ashes, built a fence, but the soil still hissed when it rained. People started leaving, quietly, packing their things at night, abandoning their homes. The school shut down, the gas station closed. Only a few of us stayed, because something told me this wasn't over. Because the blood in the basement might have been the first truth, but it wasn't the last. By fall, Harrington had turned to rust. Leaves clung to the trees like old secrets. The sky hung low, gray and swollen, like it couldn't bear to watch what was happening below. Only 87 people remained in town. It had been over 400 the year before. The new mayor stopped hosting town halls. The sheriff, once steady as iron, started twitching when the wind hit just right. There was a sickness no one wanted to name, a decay in the bones of Harrington. Every day another porch sagged, another window cracked without pressure, and no one dared walk near where the Dunlow house used to stand. But the faces kept coming. 6 more in less than a month. Left on porches, on church steps, taped to windows. No blood, no fingerprints, just skin, smoothed and stretched like artwork. Roy never left town. He rented a trailer at the edge of the forest and built antennas that hummed in the night. He barely slept, and when he did, it was in the front seat of his truck with a pistol resting on his thigh. I visited him every week. "What are we really dealing with?" I asked once. He just stared at the fire and whispered, "Old hunger." I pressed him. He gave me a folder. Inside were transcripts. Faded ones. Military records from a project called Chalk Vale, a name that meant nothing until I read the line. Subject does not die. Subject wears people. There were photos, blurry, grainy, faces like Luke's, same smile, same posture, different eras. I flipped to the last page. The Dunlow house was marked decades before Luke ever moved in. Burial site, containment, warning seals placed. Roy had a theory. Luke wasn't the start. He was a fragment, a piece, a puppet maybe. And the real thing? It might still be moving, still hungry. He called it the core. He believed the basement wasn't storage. It was a feeding site, a larder, a nest. Luke had kept trophies, yes, but they weren't just souvenirs. They were part of a ritual, a mimicry, a way to absorb. When I asked why no one stopped him sooner, Roy just looked at me with tired eyes. Because the ones who tried never made it to a second sentence. That week, the ground gave in. It started with a sinkhole behind the diner, swallowed a full dumpster. Then a crack split through Main Street like a scar across the town's spine. And with it came the stench, putrid, damp, like something long buried had finally decided to breathe. Roy sent in a drone. It didn't come back. The next day, he went in himself, told me not to follow. He descended through the old sewer access, gear strapped to his back. Said he'd plant signal markers, said he'd find the source. I waited at the surface. Hours passed. Then the screaming started. It wasn't Roy. It wasn't human. It sounded like 1,000 teeth grinding glass, like air trying to crawl out of lungs that didn't want to open. I ran. By the time backup came, there was no sign of Roy, just his radio, melted, his flashlight, cracked, and a smear of black-red sludge trailing into a deeper crevice. They sealed it with concrete. They brought in steel barriers, motion sensors, but the ground kept cracking, and at night, if you stood still, you could hear it. Whispers, flesh on stone, her in the dirt. I tried to leave once, packed a bag, got in my car, made it 6 miles before I saw him. Luke, standing in the middle of the road, not burned, not scarred, same flannel shirt, same easy smile. I blinked and he was gone. But in the morning, I found a face on my windshield, not just any face. Mine, stretched, flattened, with my old school scar beneath the left eye. The sheriff couldn't look me in the eye after that. I stopped trying to leave, because I knew now it wasn't about Luke. It wasn't even about the house. Something old had been feeding in Harrington for decades, centuries maybe, and now that it had been disturbed, it wanted more. It wanted witnesses. It wanted believers. And the only thing that stood between it and the outside world was the story. My story. The one nobody wanted to hear until the basement told the truth. The town was silent by winter. Snow fell in muffled sheets, coating the cracked roads, the boarded windows, the dying trees. Harrington had become a grave with street signs. Less than 20 people remained, and most of them didn't speak anymore. What was left to say? You couldn't out-talk rot. The sheriff was gone. They found his cruiser in the river with the engine still running, doors open, sirens frozen in the up position. No body. Just his belt and badge arranged neatly on the front seat. I think he chose the water over what he saw in the dirt. Me? I stayed. Not because I was brave, because I was tethered. To the house that wasn't there anymore. To the basement that still breathed under the earth. To the truth everyone else tried to bury under casseroles and headlines. I still dream of Roy. Sometimes he's calling for help. Other times he's just standing at the edge of the sinkhole, face split by something inside him that doesn't belong. One night I woke up to find muddy handprints across my bedroom window. Too small to be adult, too long to be child. I didn't open the blinds. In January, the snow melted too fast. It exposed things the frost had been hiding. A ring of stones behind the elementary school. Carved, weathered, older than the town itself. Beneath them, black roots curled around charred bones. Not animal, human. Some had the same facial cuts as Luke's victims, same surgical precision. Some skulls had holes too clean, too deliberate. Etched into one stone, deep under the moss, was a single phrase. He wears the ones who forget. That's when I understood. Luke wasn't becoming people, he was replacing them. Taking their place, their habits, their voices, their lives perfectly, seamlessly, and no one noticed. Because nobody ever looks too closely at kindness. The perfect mask is one you're grateful to see. I started checking records, calling counties, cross-referencing newspaper archives, missing persons cases that started in Harrington but ended elsewhere, reappeared as new names, new lives, teachers, janitors, nurses, firemen, always beloved, always just a little off. They left when the basement filled. They spread when the town stopped watching. I sent everything to the state, FBI, CDC, journalists, radio shows. Most ignored me, a few responded, then disappeared. One man, a journalist named Mike Torres, came in person, mid-40s, smart, tired eyes. He stayed a week, took photos, interviews, dug soil near the burned foundation. On his last night, we sat in the diner, the only open building left. He showed me a photo. The concrete beneath the Dunlow basement hadn't cracked from water damage. It had split outward, like something had pushed from below. He looked me in the eye and said, "This wasn't a man. This was a shell, a cocoon." I nodded. He never made it back to the highway. His rental was found wrapped around a tree. No skid marks, no signs of struggle. But his body wasn't in the car, just his skin, folded neatly in the back seat like a suit someone had outgrown. They ruled it an animal attack. I stopped contacting people after that. In March, the earth opened again. Not a sinkhole this time. A mouth wide. Circular, ringed with ridges that looked too much like molars. It opened behind the church and swallowed the bell tower whole. I stood at the edge with a flare, tossed it in. It didn't hit bottom. It burned as it fell, glowing off the slick walls, revealing dozens of passageways etched in spirals and symbols, like the ones on the stones, like the ones Luke drew in the margins of his journals. For a moment the pit came a sound, not a growl, not a scream, a voice, mining, begging, pleading, sobbing, then laughing. The others heard it too, the last remaining few. Some fled that night, clutching crucifixes and shotguns. Others packed silently and drove off with their headlights off. I stayed because I knew it wasn't done with me, and I wasn't done with it. I returned to the site of the Dunlow house. Just soil now, soft and warm even in the cold. I dug with my hands until my fingers bled. Dug until I found the first brick. Then another, and beneath it, the last thing I ever expected. A mirror, old, cracked with those same symbols along the rim. In the reflection, I saw the house as it once was, clean, painted, curtains fluttering, a fire lit in the hearth. Then Luke standing in the doorway, smiling, waving me in. I didn't flinch. I shattered the mirror with a rock, buried it again, and poured salt into the soil until the ground sizzled. That night, I made the decision. I wrote down everything. Every name, every face, every horror. I printed hundreds of copies, mailed them across the country, to schools, to churches, to radio stations, to morgues, to towns that still felt safe. Because this thing, whatever it is, feeds on silence. It lives in places where doubt is easier than belief, where charm blinds you to cold fingers around your throat, where basements go unchecked, where kind smiles deflect hard questions. I burned my house after that, left nothing behind. I don't know how long I have, but I keep moving, keep watching, keep warning. Sometimes I see his face in crowds, sometimes it's mine, but I know the truth now, and I won't stop until the world does too, because the basement told the truth, and it's still bleeding.